A widow went to her husband's grave and met a stranger, who made a shocking revelation. The grey November sky seemed to weigh heavily on Sophia's shoulders as she slowly walked among the headstones of the town cemetery. The silence was broken only by the muffled sound of her boots on the damp grass and the occasional rustling of dry leaves in the wind. 3 months had passed since Robert's funeral, her husband of 25 years, but the pain of loss was still as sharp as on the first day. Sophia adjusted the black shawl over her shoulders, a fragile shield against the cold that seeped into her bones. Her fingers tightened around the bouquet of white lilies, Robert's favorites, as she approached the family grave. Suddenly she stopped. There was someone standing in front of Robert's grave. Sophia's heart raced. The figure was a young man, perhaps in his late 20s, dressed in a worn brown leather jacket. He had his back to her, his shoulders hunched in a posture that suggested deep sadness. Sophia hesitated, torn between curiosity and indignation. Who was this stranger mourning at her husband's grave? Summoning courage, she approached, the sound of her footsteps alerting the man to her presence. He turned around, and Sophia felt the air escape her lungs. The young man's face was a softer, younger version of Robert's. The same green eyes, the same strong jawline, even the small scar above his left eyebrow. A birthmark Robert always said was a sign of good luck. "Who are you?" Sophia asked, her voice trembling slightly. The young man ran a hand through his dark hair, a gesture so familiar it made Sophia's heart ache. He hesitated for a moment before responding, his voice hoarse with emotion. "My name is Luke," he said softly. "And Robert was my father." The world seemed to spin around Sophia. The flowers slipped from her numb hands, falling silently onto the grass. This can't be," she whispered, more to herself than to the stranger, Luke, standing before her. Luke took a hesitant step towards her, his hands extended in a placating gesture. "I know this must be a shock for you, ma'am. Believe me, it wasn't easy for me to come here. But after I heard about his death, I had to." Sophia raised a hand, stopping him. Her mind was swirling with questions, each more painful than the last. How was this possible? When? Why had Robert never mentioned a son? Their whole life together, their entire marriage. Was it all a lie? "Please," Luke pleaded, his voice breaking. "I know I have no right to be here, but—" Before he could finish, the sound of hurried footsteps interrupted the moment. Sophia turned to see Clara, her 23-year-old daughter, running towards her, her face a mask of concern. "Mom, are you okay? You took so long that I got worried." Clara stopped abruptly, her eyes widening as she saw Luke. "Who is he?" Sophia looked from Clara to Luke, seeing for the first time what she should have noticed immediately. The two could be twins. The same skin tone, the same delicate bone structure. It was like looking at two sides of a mirror, separated only by time and circumstance. Luke took another step forward, his eyes fixed on Clara with a mixture of awe and recognition. "You must be my—" "No," Sophia shouted, surprising everyone, including herself. "Don't say anything else. Not here. Not now." Clara looked confusedly from her mother to the stranger. Mom, what's going on? Who is he?" Sophia closed her eyes for a moment, trying to regain control. When she opened them again, her expression was one of determination. "Clara, dear, this is Luke. He claims to be your father's son." The silence that followed was deafening. Clara turned pale, her hands visibly trembling. "That's impossible," she whispered. "Zydad never—" "Apparently," Sophia said, her voice laden with a bitterness she had never felt before. "There was a lot about your father that we didn't know." Luke seemed torn between the desire to approach and the instinct to flee. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I didn't mean to cause trouble. I just wanted to know." Sophia took a deep breath, feeling the weight of 2 decades of memories and love being re-evaluated in a matter of seconds. She looked at Robert's grave, at the smiling photo of the man she thought she knew so well. "Well, Luke," she said finally, her voice steady despite the emotional storm inside her. "It seems we have a lot to talk about." As the cold November wind blew around them, carrying the distant sound of church bells, Sophia knew that nothing in her life would ever be the same. The man she had loved for so many years had taken his secrets to the grave, but the past refused to stay buried. With one last look at Robert's headstone, Sophia turned to Clara and Luke. "Let's go home," she said softly. "We have a long story to unravel." And so, under the grey November sky, three strangers united by invisible ties left the cemetery together, each step taking them deeper into a mystery that threatened to unearth not only long-hidden secrets, but also the very foundation upon which their lives had been built. The silence in the car was palpable as Sophia drove back home. Clara sat stiffly in the passenger seat, her eyes fixed on the road ahead, while Luke occupied the back seat, his presence an unsettling shadow in the rearview mirror. Sophia gripped the steering wheel so tightly that her fingers turned white. Her mind was a whirlwind of memories, each now tainted by doubt. Summer of 1995, Robert surprising her with a picnic by the lake, his radiant smile as he knelt, ring in hand. "Sophia, you're the only woman I've ever loved. Will you marry me?" The only one. Sophia almost laughed bitterly. What other lies had he told? "Mum." Clara's voice cut through her thoughts. This can't be true. There must be some mistake. Sophia glanced briefly at her daughter. Clara's face was pale, her green eyes so much like Robert's, shining with unshed tears. "Clara, Sophia began, but the words failed her. How could she explain something she herself barely understood? "I know it's hard to believe." Luke's voice sounded from the back seat, hesitant. Believe me, it wasn't easy for me to find out. Nobody asked for your opinion," Clara snapped, turning to face him. "You show up out of nowhere, claiming to be my father's son. What proof do you have?" Luke reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled photograph. "I have this," he said softly, extending the photo to Clara. Sophia parked the car in the driveway and turned to look. Her heart stopped for a moment. The photo showed a younger Robert, perhaps in his early 30s, holding a baby in his arms. His smile was radiant, his eyes full of love as he looked at the child. "This was taken the day I was born," Luke explained. "My mother, she gave me this photo when I turned 18. That's when she told me about Robert." Sophia closed her eyes, feeling a wave of nausea. The date printed in the corner of the photo was 22 years ago, 2 years after her marriage to Robert. "That doesn't prove anything," Clara insisted, but her voice wavered slightly. "It could be any baby." Sophia opened her eyes and looked more closely at the photo. No, it couldn't be any baby. The small face in the image was unmistakably similar to Clara's when she was a newborn. "Let's go inside," Sophia said finally, her voice sounding strange to her own ears. "We'll continue this conversation inside." The house, once a refuge of happy memories, now felt strangely hostile. Sophia led everyone to the living room, noticing how Luke looked around with a mixture of curiosity and discomfort. "Sit," she said to Luke, indicating an armchair. Clara threw herself onto the couch, still casting suspicious glances at the newcomer. Sophia remained standing, unable to calm down. Her eyes wandered around the room, landing on each family photo, each reminder of her life with Robert. 25 years of marriage, and now. "Why now?" she asked abruptly, turning to Luke. "Why wait until after his death to show up?" Luke lowered his gaze, his hands twisting in his lap. I didn't know about you until recently. My mother always told me that Robert was my father, but that he couldn't be part of my life. It was only after I saw the obituary in the newspaper, that's when I discovered about you." Sophia felt a pang of pain at the thought of Luke's mother, an unknown woman who had shared a part of Robert that she had never known. "And your mother?" Clara asked, her voice softer now. "Where is she?" "She passed away 3 years ago," Luke replied, the sadness evident in his voice. "Cancer." A heavy silence fell over the room. Sophia looked at the photo of her wedding on the wall, Robert's radiant smile frozen in time. How could he keep this secret for so long? "I know this is a lot to process," Luke said after a moment. "If you prefer, I can leave and come back another day." "No," Sophia said firmly, surprising herself. "You came here for a reason. I think we all deserve to know the truth, no matter how painful it is." Clara stood up abruptly. "I need some air," she murmured, quickly leaving the room. The sound of the back door slamming echoed through the house. Sophia sighed, feeling the weight of 2 decades of lies on her shoulders. She turned to Luke, studying his face, Robert's face, Clara's face. "Tell me everything," she said softly. "From the beginning." Luke nodded slowly, taking a deep breath. When he began to speak, his voice trembled slightly. "My mother's name was Adriana. She met Robert in 1996. As Luke unfolded the story of a forbidden love and broken promises, Sophia felt her world crumble even more. Each word was a crack in her memories, a shadow cast over moments she thought were perfect. Outside, the sky darkened, the first drops of rain tapping against the windows. Sophia listened with a heavy heart, fighting against the wave of denial that threatened to engulf her. She knew this was only the tip of the iceberg. Robert's secrets, buried for so long, were finally coming to light, and Sophia feared what else might be revealed. When Luke finished his story, the silence in the room was deafening. Sophia looked out the window, seeing the distorted reflection of her fragmented family in the rain-streaked glass. One thing was certain: nothing would ever be the same again. The morning arrived grey and cold, finding Sophia sitting in the kitchen, an untouched cup of coffee in front of her. She hadn't slept, the revelations of the previous day echoing in her mind like an endless nightmare. Clara had locked herself in her room the night before, refusing to come out or speak. Luke, at Sophia's insistence, was staying in the guest room. The house, once a haven of happiness, now felt like an emotional minefield. Sophia looked at the clock. 6:30 a.m. Making a sudden decision, she stood up. If the answers wouldn't come to her, she would go find them. Robert's office was exactly as he had left it. Sophia hesitated at the door, feeling like an intruder in her own home. Taking a deep breath, she entered. The familiar smell of leather and old paper enveloped her. For a moment, she could almost feel Robert's presence, almost hear his laughter echoing through the walls. Sophia shook her head, pushing away the nostalgia. She had a purpose. She started with the desk drawers, methodically examining each folder, each document. Bills, work contracts, nothing out of the ordinary. Until, at the bottom of the last drawer, hidden under a pile of unimportant papers, Sophia found a small metal box. Her heart raced. In 25 years of marriage, she had never seen this box. With trembling hands, she opened it. Inside, she found a series of letters yellowed with age, all addressed to Robert, all from the same sender, Adriana. Sophia felt as if the air had been sucked out of the room. Adriana, Luke's mother. With a heavy heart, she picked up the first letter and began to read. "My dear Robert, I know we promised this would be the last time, but I can't get you out of my mind. What we had was more than an affair, you know that. Our son grows every day, and he has your eyes." Sophia let the letter fall, feeling nauseous. There were dozens of them, covering a period of years. Love letters, pleas, promises. The story of a secret relationship that lasted much longer than she could have imagined. As she read, an image of Robert she had never known began to form. A man torn between 2 lives, making promises he couldn't keep, struggling with his conscience. Among the letters, Sophia found something that made her blood run cold. A bank statement for an account she didn't know about. An account with a considerable amount of money, with regular transfers to a name she now recognized, Adriana Silva. "Oh, Robert," Sophia whispered, feeling hot tears streaming down her cheeks. "What have you done?" A soft sound at the door made her turn abruptly. Clara was standing there, her eyes red from a sleepless night. "Mom?" she asked hesitantly. What are you doing?" Sophia looked at the pile of letters in her hands, at the bank statement. How could she explain this to her daughter? How could she protect her from the harsh truth about the father she idolized? "Clara, dear," Sophia began, but was interrupted by the sound of the doorbell. Mother and daughter exchanged glances, the tension palpable in the air. Who could it be at this hour of the morning? Sophia stood up, putting the letters back in the box. "I'll see who it is," she said softly. "Please wait here." As she descended the stairs, Sophia saw through the glass of the front door a familiar figure. Her heart sank. Edward, Robert's brother. She opened the door, forcing a smile. Edward. What a surprise. What brings you here so early? Edward's face was tense, his eyes restless. Sophia, we need to talk, he said, his voice low and urgent. It's about Robert and the young man I saw leaving the cemetery yesterday. Sophia felt the blood drain from her face. How did Edward know about Luke? What else did he know? Come in, she said, stepping aside. As Edward passed by her, Sophia noticed his hands trembling slightly. In the living room, Edward sat down, running his hands through his graying hair. Sophia, I know this is going to sound crazy, but that young man, he's Robert's son, isn't he? Sophia stood still, too surprised to respond. Edward continued, the words coming in a torrent. I always knew Robert had another child. He told me years ago, made me promise to keep it a secret. Said it was a mistake from the past, that he was taking care of the situation. I never imagined it would come to this. Sophia finally found her voice. You knew. All this time, you knew and never told me. Edward lowered his eyes, guilt evident on his face. I promised Robert. He was my brother, Sophia. I thought I was protecting all of you. At that moment, Luke appeared at the top of the stairs, drawn by the commotion. His eyes widened when he saw Edward. Uncle Edward? He asked, incredulous. Edward stood up abruptly, shock evident on his face. Luke! My God, you look just like your father. Sophia watched the scene unfold, feeling like a spectator in her own life. Luke descended the stairs slowly, his eyes never leaving Edward. You know me? Luke asked, his voice trembling slightly. Edward nodded slowly. I saw photos of you. Robert showed me, over the years. He always wanted to know how you were. The silence that followed was deafening. Sophia looked from Edward to Luke, feeling the weight of 2 decades of secrets in the air between them. Finally, she spoke, her voice firm despite the whirlwind of emotions in her chest. I think it's time for all of us to sit down and have a long conversation. No more secrets, no more lies. Shay, it's time for the truth to come out, no matter how painful it is. As everyone settled in the living room, the air heavy with anticipation and fear, Sophia knew that the revelations to come would change their lives forever. The past that Robert had so carefully buried was about to be completely unearthed, and nothing would ever be the same again. The afternoon sun filtered through the living room curtains, casting long shadows over the tense faces of those present. Sophia, Clara, Luke, and Edward sat in loaded silence, each lost in their own thoughts after hours of painful revelations. Clara was the first to break the silence, her voice trembling slightly. So, in all this time, I had a brother and no one thought I should know. Her eyes, red from crying, darted from Edward to Sophia, seeking answers that no one seemed able to give. Sophia leaned forward, reaching out to her daughter, but Clara pulled away. Honey, I swear I didn't know. If I had known... If you had known what, Mom? Clara interrupted, her voice rising. Would you have told me? Or would you have kept the secret like everyone else? Luke, who had remained silent for most of the conversation, spoke softly. Clara, don't blame your mother. She's as shocked as we are. Clara turned to him, her eyes blazing. And you? How can you be so calm? You just found out you have a sister. Luke sighed, running a hand through his hair in a way that painfully reminded Sophia of Robert. Believe me, I'm far from calm. But fighting among ourselves won't change the past. Edward cleared his throat, drawing everyone's attention. I know I have no right to ask this, but can we try to see this as an opportunity? A chance to unite the family Robert left behind? The look Sophia gave Edward could have frozen hell. Unite the family. Edward, you hid this from me for years. Years! How dare you talk about uniting the family? Edward visibly shrank under Sophia's glare. I know I was wrong, but Robert was my brother. He begged me to keep the secret. He said he was protecting all of you. Protecting us? Sophia laughed bitterly. From what, the truth? Clara stood up abruptly, tears running freely down her face. I need air. I can't deal with this right now. Before anyone could stop her, She ran out of the room. The sound of the front door slamming echoed through the house, leaving a heavy silence in its wake. Luke made a move to get up, but Sophia stopped him with a gesture. "Let her go. She needs time." For a moment, no one spoke. The ticking of the clock on the wall seemed deafening in the oppressive silence. Finally, Luke turned to Sophia, his eyes, Robert's eyes, full of a mixture of fear and hope. "What happens now? I understand if you don't want me around." Sophia studied the young man's face, seeing not just Robert, but also traces of Clara, of herself. Despite the pain and anger she felt, she couldn't deny the bond that was already beginning to form. "Luke," she said softly, "you are Robert's son. That makes you family, whether we like it or not. I'm not going to deny that this is complicated, but you have as much right to be here as any of us." Edward let out an audible sigh of relief, but Sophia silenced him with a look. "As for you, Edward, we have a lot to talk about, but not now. Now I need to find my daughter." Standing up, Sophia grabbed her coat and car keys. Before leaving, she turned to Luke. "There's food in the fridge if you're hungry. Make yourself at home. And Edward." Edward looked up, hopeful. "Go home. We'll talk later." With that, Sophia left, leaving the two men alone in the living room. The sound of Sophia's car driving away broke the silence. Luke looked at Edward, a million questions in his eyes. "So, you knew about me all along?" Edward slowly nodded. "Robert showed me photos of you from time to time. He talked about you, with pride, you know, even though he could never be part of your life openly." Luke felt a lump form in his throat. Why didn't he want to meet me?" Edward sighed deeply. "It's complicated, Luke. Robert loved both of you, you and Clara. But he made choices that haunted him for the rest of his life." Meanwhile, Sophia drove through the familiar streets of the town, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew exactly where Clara would be. The park was almost empty at that time of day. Sophia spotted Clara sitting on a swing, the same one where she and Robert used to take the girl when she was little. Approaching slowly, Sophia sat on the swing next to her daughter. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. "I always wanted a brother," Clara finally said, her voice almost a whisper. "When I was little, I used to ask you and Dad, and now I have one, and I don't know how to feel about it." Sophia reached out, gently holding her daughter's hand. "I know, sweetheart. All of this it's too much. But we'll get through this together, okay? One day at a time." Clara looked at her mother, fresh tears shining in her eyes. "How can we trust anyone again, Mom? How can we be sure there aren't more secrets?" Sophia felt her heart break a little more. "We can't, my love, but we can choose to be honest from now on. We can choose to build something new from this." As mother and daughter hugged, the sun began to set on the horizon. The future was uncertain, full of challenges and unresolved emotions. But for now, in that moment, they had each other, and maybe, just maybe, that was enough to start. Dawn found Sophia sitting on the porch, a cup of coffee cooling between her hands. The dew still glistened on the grass, and the fresh morning air carried the promise of a new day. But for Sophia, each new day now brought with it the weight of unwanted revelations and unanswered questions. The screen door creaked softly, and Luke appeared, hesitant. "Good morning," he murmured, his eyes, Robert's eyes, seeking permission to join her. Sophia nodded silently, indicating the chair next to her. For a moment they sat there, the silence broken only by the occasional bird song. "You know," Sophia began, her voice hoarse from disuse, "there was a time when I thought I knew everything about Robert. Every dream, every fear, every secret." She laughed without humor. "What a fool I was." Luke shifted uncomfortably. I'm sorry. If I had known my coming would cause so much trouble." Sophia interrupted him with a gesture. "Don't apologize for existing, Luke. You didn't ask to be born into this situation, just as Clara didn't. The blame." She hesitated, the pain evident in her voice. "The blame is Robert's. And maybe a little mine, and for being so blind." At that moment, Clara appeared at the door, her eyes swollen from a sleepless night. She looked from Sophia to Luke, the tension visible in her shoulders. "Good morning," she murmured, her voice still laden with emotion. Can I join you?" Sophia smiled softly, extending her hand to her daughter. Clara hesitated for a moment before accepting, sitting on the porch step at her mother's feet. "I think it's time we face this head-on," Sophia said, looking at the two young people. "We can't change the past, but we can decide how to deal with the present." Luke nodded slowly. I have some things that might help clarify some things. Letters my mother kept. If you want to see them." Clara tensed visibly, but Sophia placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "I think we need to see them, dear, no matter how painful it is." Luke stood up and went to get the letters. When he returned, the three moved to the living room, the intimacy of the porch suddenly feeling too exposed for what was to come. With trembling hands, Luke handed a bundle of yellowed letters to Sophia. "They're all from Robert to my mother. She kept them all these years." Sophia took the letters, feeling their weight, not just physical, but emotional. With Clara by her side and Luke nervously sitting in the opposite armchair, she opened the first letter. My dear Adriana," Sophia read aloud, her voice trembling slightly. "Not a day goes by that I don't think of you and our son. The guilt eats at me, but I can't abandon my family. Sophia and Clara don't deserve that. I hope one day you can forgive me." Clara sobbed softly, and Sophia stopped reading, pulling her daughter close. Luke stared at his hands, avoiding the gaze of the two women. "There's more," Sophia said after a moment, flipping through the letters. "Much more." As she read, an image of Robert she had never known began to form. A man torn between duty and desire, struggling with his conscience, making promises he couldn't keep. "So he loved you," Sophia said softly to Luke, looking over the letters. "That's clear. But he also loved us. He was trapped." Luke nodded, unshed tears shining in his eyes. "My mother always said he was a good man who made difficult choices. I never fully understood until now." Clara, who had remained silent, finally spoke. "How can we trust anything we believed about him? About ourselves?" Sophia set the letters aside and held her daughter's hands. "Clara, dear, what your father did was complicated, wrong in many ways, but the love he had for you, for us, that was real. Of that, I'm sure." Luke leaned forward, his voice soft. "He talked about you in the letters, Clara. About how smart you were, how strong. He was so proud of you." Clara looked at Luke, really seeing him for the first time. He talked about me." Luke nodded, a small smile forming. "All the time. He said you had your mother's smile and his determination." For a moment, silence reigned in the room. Then, to everyone's surprise, Clara stood up and walked over to Luke. Hesitantly, she extended her hand. I think we never properly introduced ourselves. I'm Clara, your sister." Luke took her hand, his eyes filling with tears. "Luke, your brother." Sophia watched the scene, her heart filling with a mixture of pain and hope. It was a small step, but a significant one. "Oh, there's one more thing," Luke said, releasing Clara's hand and pulling an envelope from his pocket. "I found this among my mother's things after she passed away. It's addressed to you, Sophia." Sophia took the envelope with trembling hands. Her name was written in Robert's familiar handwriting. Slowly, she opened it and began to read in silence. As her eyes scanned the words, tears began to fall. Clara and Luke watched anxiously, unsure of how to react. Finally, Sophia looked up, her face a mixture of emotions. "He knew he was dying," she said softly. "Months before the accident, he had a brain aneurysm. The doctors said it could rupture at any time." Clara gasped, covering her mouth with her hand. Luke leaned forward, his expression intense. Sophia continued, her voice trembling. "He wanted to tell everything. About you, Luke. About Adriana. He says he couldn't bear the thought of dying with these secrets. But then, the accident happened," Luke concluded softly. Sophia nodded, tears running freely down her face. "He loved us all, and he was torn apart by it until the end. Clara knelt beside her mother, hugging her tightly. Luke remained where he was, silent tears streaming down his cheeks. For a long moment, the room was silent, filled only with the soft sound of sobs. It was a moment of mourning, not just for Robert, but for the idea everyone had of him, for the life that could have been. Finally, Sophia straightened up, wiping her tears. She looked at Clara, then at Luke. "We can't change the past," she said softly, "but we can choose how to move forward, together, if we want." Clara and Luke exchanged a look, years of secrets and separation between them, but also the possibility of a new beginning. "Together," Clara said, extending her hand to Luke. Luke took her hand, then Sophia's. "Together," he agreed. And there, in that room full of memories and revealed secrets, three people united by the complicated love of one man began to weave the first threads of a new family. Sophia felt the weight of the world on her shoulders as she headed to the local church. Father Thomas had called earlier, his grave voice carrying an urgency she couldn't ignore. "There's something you need to know, Sophia," he said. "Something about Luke." The name of her late husband echoed in her mind, bringing forth a mixture of emotions she struggled to contain. The cobblestone streets of the small town seemed narrower than ever, the old houses silent witnesses to long-kept secrets. Arriving at the church, Sophia hesitated for a moment before the heavy oak doors. She took a deep breath, gathering courage, and entered. The cool, dark interior of the church enveloped her, the smell of incense and old wood bringing back memories of simpler times. Father Thomas was waiting for her in the confessional. His wrinkled face was marked by an expression of regret and relief. "Sophia, my child," he began, his voice low and comforting. "For a long time, I've carried a burden that is not mine to bear. It's time for you to know the truth about Luke." Sophia felt her heart race. "What truth, Father? What did Luke hide from me?" The old priest sighed deeply. "Luke came to me many years ago, tormented by a secret that consumed him. He told me about a son, Sophia, a son he had before he met you." The words hit Sophia like a punch to the stomach. She clung to the wooden bench, feeling the world spin around her. "A son?" she whispered, incredulous. Father Thomas nodded sadly. "His name is John. He was born from a brief relationship Luke had when he was very young, before he even moved to this town." Sophia struggled to process the information. The memories of Luke, his gentle smile, his eyes full of love, now seemed distorted, tainted by this revelation. "Why did he never tell me?" she asked, her voice trembling with emotion. "Luke was tormented, Sophia," explained the father. "He loved you deeply and feared that this truth could destroy everything you had built together. He came to me seeking guidance, confessing his sin of omission." Sophia closed her eyes, letting the tears run freely down her cheeks. All these years, he carried this secret alone. Father Thomas reached out, gently touching Sophia's shoulder. "Not completely alone. He confided in me, seeking comfort and spiritual guidance. Luke suffered greatly with this decision, Sophia. He feared losing you, but also felt guilty for denying John's existence." As the initial shock began to fade, Sophia found herself flooded with conflicting emotions: anger at the betrayal, sadness for the pain Luke must have felt, confusion about how this would change her perception of the man she had loved for so many years. "How could he do this?" Sophia asked, more to herself than to the father. "How could he hide something so important?" Father Thomas spoke softly, his voice full of compassion. "Fear, my child, can lead even the best men to make mistakes. Luke was torn between his love for you and his sense of responsibility towards John. He feared that revealing the truth could destroy the family you had built together." Sophia stood up abruptly, pacing back and forth in the small chapel. "But what about John? He grew up without a father, without knowing his true heritage." The father nodded sadly. "Luke provided financially for John, through a discreet arrangement with the boy's mother. But you're right, Sophia. John grew up without knowing his father." The emotional complexities of the situation weighed heavily on Sophia. She could imagine Luke, the man she thought she knew so well, struggling with this impossible decision. The fear of losing everything, the weight of guilt, the pain of denying his own son. All of it must have been a constant torment for him. "Why are you telling me this now, Father?" Sophia asked, her voice tired. Father Thomas took an envelope from his pocket. "Luke left this for you to be delivered after his death. He wanted you to know the truth, but didn't have the courage to tell you in life. He hoped you could forgive him and perhaps reach out to John." Sophia took the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a handwritten letter in Luke's familiar handwriting. Tears blurred her vision as she read, "My beloved Sophia, if you are reading this, it means I didn't have the courage to tell you the truth in life. Forgive me for my cowardice. There is something you need to know, something that has tormented me for years. Before I met you, I had a son. His name is John. He was born from a brief relationship in my youth. When I found out about his existence, I had already fallen in love with you, and the fear of losing our love led me to make the most difficult decision of my life. I provided financially for John, but never had the courage to be part of his life. The weight of this decision has been my cross to bear. I love you, Sophia, more than words can express, but I cannot deny that I also love John even without knowing him. I ask for your forgiveness, though I know I don't deserve it. And if there is room in your heart, I ask that you consider reaching out to John. He deserves to know the truth about his origins. With all my love and regret, Luke." Sophia let the letter fall into her lap, feeling emotionally exhausted. The silence of the church seemed to amplify the turmoil in her mind. Father Thomas spoke again, his voice gentle. "Sophia, I know this is a lot to process. Luke trusted me not just as his confessor, but as a friend. I saw his struggle, his pain. He loved you deeply, but the weight of this secret consumed him." Sophia wiped away her tears, trying to organize her thoughts. "I don't know what to feel, Father. Part of me wants to scream in anger. Another part wants to cry for the pain Luke must have felt. And there's a part of me that wonders about John, about what he knows, about who he is." The old priest nodded understandingly. "It's natural to feel that way, my child. Luke faced an impossible dilemma. He chose to protect the love you shared, but the cost of that choice was high." Sophia reflected on the years she had spent with Luke, the moments of joy and sorrow they had shared. Now, she could see the times when he seemed distant, lost in thoughts she couldn't reach. Were those the moments when the weight of his secret was overwhelming him? "What should I do now, Father?" she asked, feeling lost. Father Thomas placed a comforting hand on hers. "That is a decision only you can make, Sophia. But remember, forgiveness is not just for Luke. It's also for you, to free your heart from the weight of hurt and anger." Sophia nodded slowly, feeling a calm begin to settle in her turbulent heart. "And what about John? Does he deserve to know the truth?" "That is also your choice," the father replied. "But think about what Luke asked in his letter. Perhaps, by reaching out to John, you can find a way to heal both of you." Sophia stood up, feeling both exhausted and strangely light. The truth, as painful as it was, had been revealed. Now, it was up to her to decide what to do with it. "Thank you, Father Thomas," she said softly, "for carrying this burden for so long and for sharing it with me now." As she left the church, Sophia felt the last rays of the late afternoon sun caress her face. The world seemed different now, as if a veil had been lifted. The echoes of the past reverberated in her mind, but there was also a sense of possibility, of a future yet unwritten. As she walked home, Sophia knew she had difficult decisions ahead: forgiving Luke, accepting the truth about John, deciding whether or not to reach out to him. Each choice seemed monumental. But for the first time in a long time, she felt truly alive, facing the unknown with a mixture of fear and determination. The secrets of the past had been revealed, and now it was up to Sophia to shape the future with the truths she had discovered. As the shadows of night began to fall, she wondered what new chapters this revelation would open in her life, and in the life of a young man she had never known, but who was now an inextricable part of her story. The afternoon sun filtered through the living room windows, casting long shadows over the tense faces of Sophia, Clara, and Luke. The silence that hung in the air was heavy, laden with unspoken revelations and raw emotions. Sophia took a deep breath, gathering the courage for what she was about to do. "Clara, Luke," she began, her voice trembling slightly. There's something you both need to know. Clara looked up, worry evident in her gaze. What is it, Mom? Did something happen? Sophia nodded slowly, feeling the weight of each word. I discovered something about your father, about his past. Luke leaned forward, his expression a mix of curiosity and apprehension. What did you find out? Sophia closed her eyes for a moment, seeking strength. When she opened them again, her voice was firm. Robert had another child. Her child he had before he met me, before Clara was born. The silence that followed was deafening. Clara turned pale, her hands visibly trembling. Luke, for his part, seemed struck by lightning, his eyes wide with shock. What? Clara finally managed to say, her voice barely a whisper. How is that possible? Sophia explained everything she had discovered through Father Thomas and Robert's letter. As she spoke, she watched Clara and Luke's reactions, seeing the pain, confusion, and anger play across their faces. Why did he never tell us? Clara asked, tears beginning to stream down her cheeks. Why keep it a secret for so long? Sophia reached out to her daughter, but Clara pulled away sharply. He was afraid, Sophia explained softly, afraid of losing everything we had built together. Luke, who had been silent until then, finally spoke. So I have another brother. His voice was a mix of conflicting emotions. Sophia nodded. Yes, Luke. His name is John. Clara stood up abruptly, her eyes blazing with anger. This is crazy. First we find out about Luke, and now this. How many more secrets did Dad have? Clara, please, Sophia implored. Try to understand. Your father was in an impossible situation. Understand, Clara shouted, tears streaming freely down her face. Understand what? That our entire life was built on lies. Luke stood up, trying to calm Clara. Hey, I know this is a shock, but... Clara turned to him, her voice cutting. Don't you dare tell me how to feel. You shouldn't even be here. The words hit Luke like a slap. He stepped back, the pain evident in his eyes. I'm sorry. Maybe it's better if I leave. No, Sophia said firmly, standing up. No one is going anywhere. We need to deal with this together, as a family. Family? Clara laughed bitterly. What family? The one Dad built on lies. Sophia felt her heart break at the sight of her daughter's pain. Clara, dear, I know you're hurt. We all are. But your father loved us, all of us. He made terrible mistakes, but... Mistakes? Clara interrupted. Keeping children secret isn't a mistake, Mom. Those are choices. Choices he made consciously, day after day, year after year. Luke, who had remained silent, finally spoke. Look, Clara, I understand your anger. Believe me, I spent years feeling that way. But hating won't change the past. Clara turned to him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. How can you be so calm? How can you defend a man who abandoned us? Luke sighed deeply. I'm not defending what he did. But after years of trying to understand Etsy, I realized that anger only consumed me. It didn't change anything. Sophia watched the exchange between her children, feeling a glimmer of hope. Despite the pain and confusion, there was a connection forming, a mutual understanding born of shared experience. And what about John? Clara asked suddenly, her voice softer. What happens with him now? Sophia exchanged a look with Luke before answering. Puretu, that's something we need to decide together. Robert left it to me to decide whether to contact him or not. Luke approached Clara, hesitant. Hey, I know this is a lot to process, but maybe we can see this as an opportunity to meet someone who is part of us, part of our history. Clara looked at Luke, then at her mother. The anger in her eyes slowly gave way to a mixture of fear and curiosity. What if he doesn't want to meet us? What if he hates us for having the father he never had? Sophia felt her heart tighten at Clara's words. We can't control how John will react, dear, but we can choose to be honest and open from now on. No more secrets. Luke nodded, a small smile forming. Together, we can face this together. Clara hesitated for a moment before extending her hand to Luke. Together, she agreed softly. Sophia watched her children, feeling a mixture of pain and hope. The road ahead would be difficult, full of confusing emotions and painful conversations. But for the first time since Robert's secrets came to light, she felt a spark of optimism. As the sun began to set outside, casting a golden glow over the room, Sophia, Clara, and Luke remained together, united by bonds of blood and a shared history of love, loss, and now the promise of a new beginning. The future was uncertain, but they would face it together one day at a time, unearthing the truth and building something new from the ruins of the past. The morning sun had barely risen when Sophia woke up, her heart heavy with the decision she had made the night before. Today would be the day the truth about Robert and his secret family would be revealed to everyone. As she prepared breakfast, Clara and Luke joined her in the kitchen, their faces reflecting a mixture of anxiety and determination. "Are you sure you want to do this, Mom?" Clara asked, her voice trembling. Sophia nodded slowly. "Yes, dear. No more secrets. It's time to face this head-on." Luke placed a comforting hand on Sophia's shoulder. "We're with you, no matter what happens." With one last look of encouragement between them, the three left the house, ready to face whatever came next. The community hall was packed. Familiar faces turned to look as Sophia, Clara, and Luke entered. Curious murmurs filled the air. Edward, Robert's brother, sat in the front row, his face a mask of concern. Sophia walked to the podium, feeling the weight of all the eyes on her. She took a deep breath and began, "Thank you all for coming. I know many of you are wondering why I called you here today. The truth is, there's something I need to share with all of you. Something about Robert." A tense silence fell over the room. Sophia continued, her voice gaining strength as she spoke. "Robert, the man we all loved and respected, had secrets. Secrets he carried to the grave, but that can no longer remain hidden." She paused, observing the reactions of the audience. Some looked confused, others apprehensive. Edward lowered his head, as if he already knew what was coming. "Robert had another child besides Clara, a child he had before he met me, before he moved to our town." The murmurs grew louder, some audible gasps from the crowd. Sophia saw shock and disbelief on the faces of her friends and neighbors. "His name is Luke," she said, gesturing to the young man beside her. "And there's more. We recently discovered that Robert had another child from an earlier relationship. His name is John, and so far we haven't had contact with him." The hall erupted in agitated conversations. Sophia saw expressions of shock, disbelief, and even anger spread through the crowd. "I know this is a shock to all of you. Believe me, it was a shock to us too. But I'm here today not to judge Robert E., but to be honest with all of you, our community." Clara stepped forward, her voice trembling slightly. "My father made mistakes, but he was also a good man who loved his family and this town. Please don't let this tarnish all the good things he did." Luke also spoke. "I know I'm a stranger to many of you, but I hope you can give me a chance to get to know me, to be part of this community that my father loved so much." The silence that followed was deafening. Then slowly a voice rose from the crowd. It was Mrs. Thompson, the retired teacher who had taught Robert as a child. "Sophia, dear," she said, her voice gentle, "it must have been very difficult for you to share this with us. Thank you for your honesty." Other voices began to join in, some expressing support, others still full of confusion and even anger. "How could you hide this for so long?" someone shouted. "So what does this mean for Robert's inheritance?" another questioned. Edward finally stood up, his firm voice cutting through the commotion. "I knew," he admitted, to the shock of many. "I knew about Luke, but I kept the secret at my brother's request. I ask for forgiveness from you all for my silence." Edward's revelation seemed to calm the crowd a bit. If even Robert's brother had kept the secret, how could they blame Sophia? Sophia raised her hands, asking for silence. "I know this is a lot to process. I don't expect you to understand or forgive immediately. But I ask that you remember the man Robert was, the friend, the neighbor, the member of this community that we all loved." She paused, looking directly at the familiar faces in front of her. "And I ask that you give Luke a chance, and perhaps one day John, to be part of this family and this community." The hall was silent for a moment, everyone processing what they had heard. Then, slowly, Father Thomas stood up. "My dear ones," he began, his voice calm and comforting, "we are all imperfect. Robert carried a heavy burden, but he also loved deeply. Let us find in our hearts the compassion to understand and, in time, forgive." His words seemed to touch something in the crowd. Slowly, expressions of shock and anger began to give way to a reluctant understanding. As people began to disperse, many approached Sophia, Clara, and Luke. Some offered words of comfort. Others still seemed uncertain, but most expressed gratitude for the honesty. At the end of the meeting, Sophia, Clara, and Luke remained together, exhausted but relieved. The worst was over. The truth was out. "And now?" Clara asked, her voice tired. Sophia looked at her children, feeling a mixture of pride and determination. "And now, we start to rebuild, with honesty, with love, and hopefully with the support of this community." Luke nodded, a small smile on his lips. Together. As they left the community hall, the afternoon sun bathed the town in a golden light. The future was still uncertain, full of challenges and difficult conversations. But for the first time in a long time, Sophia felt they could face it head-on, without the weight of secrets. The truth had come out, and with it, the chance for a new beginning. The days following the public revelation were an emotional roller coaster for Sophia, Clara, and Luke. The town, once a refuge of familiarity and comfort, now felt like a minefield of curious glances and barely concealed whispers. Sophia was in the kitchen, preparing breakfast, when she heard the front door slam. Clara entered, her eyes red and swollen, clearly having cried. "What happened, dear?" Sophia asked, immediately concerned. Clara threw her bag on the table with force. "I went to the market and Mrs. Perez kept looking at me like I was a stranger. Then I heard her whispering to her daughter about how poor Clara must be devastated to find out her father was a liar." Sophia felt her heart tighten. "Oh, Clara." "And that's not all," Clara continued, her voice trembling with anger and hurt. "On the way home I passed Mr. Johnson. He literally crossed the street to avoid talking to me. At that moment, Luke entered the kitchen, looking equally dejected. "Hey," he said softly. Noticing the tense atmosphere, Clara turned to him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "How do you handle this? People treating you like an intruder, like you don't belong here." Luke sighed, running a hand through his hair in a gesture that painfully reminded Sophia of Robert. "It's not easy," he admitted, "but I try to remember that it's not their fault. It's a difficult situation for everyone." Sophia watched the interaction between her children, feeling a mixture of pride and pain. "You two are so strong," she said softly, "stronger than I could ever be." Clara turned to her mother, the anger in her eyes giving way to a vulnerability that broke Sophia's heart. "How are you dealing with all this, Mom? With people talking behind your back, questioning your entire marriage?" Sophia took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her own emotions. "I'm not going to lie. It's hard. There are moments when I want to scream to the world that the love Robert and I shared was real, despite his secrets. But then I remember that the opinions of others don't change what we had, what we felt." Luke approached, placing a comforting hand on Sophia's shoulder. "You're amazing, you know that. Facing all this with such grace." Sophia smiled sadly. "I don't feel very graceful most of the time. There are nights when I cry myself to sleep, questioning every moment of my marriage. But then I look at you two and I know that, despite everything, something good came out of it." Clara, who had remained silent, suddenly spoke. Sometimes I hate Dad for doing this to us, for leaving us to deal with this mess." The silence that followed was heavy, laden with unspoken emotions. Finally, Luke broke the silence. "You know, for a long time I hated Robert too. I hated him for not being there, for choosing another family over mine. But now I understand a little better. It doesn't justify what he did, but what?" Clara asked, her voice a mix of challenge and curiosity. "But he was human," Luke concluded softly. "Imperfect, scared, trying to do the best he could with the choices he had made." Sophia felt tears well up in her eyes. Your father loved you both, loved all of us. He made terrible mistakes, but that love was real. Clara wiped away her own tears. And what about John? Do you think we should try to find him? The question hung in the air, heavy with possibilities and unspoken fears. Sophia exchanged a look with Luke before answering. I think we should. He deserves to know the truth, deserves the chance to meet his family, but only if we all agree. Luke nodded slowly. I agree. He's our brother, after all. But Clara, if you're not comfortable with it. Clara was silent for a long moment, her thoughts clearly in conflict. Finally, she spoke. Okay, let's find him. He's probably just as confused and hurt as we are. Sophia felt a wave of pride for her children. Despite the pain and confusion, they were choosing compassion and understanding. Then it's decided, Sophia said, her voice firm despite the tears in her eyes. We'll find John and offer him the chance to be part of this family, if he wants. As the three of them hugged, Sophia felt a small ray of hope. The path ahead was still uncertain, full of challenges and hearts that needed healing, but they would face it together, one day at a time. Outside, and the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the town. The shadows of the past were still there, but now there was also the promise of a new dawn, of a family rebuilt on the foundations of truth and forgiveness. The price of honesty had been high, but perhaps, just perhaps, the reward would be even greater. The sun set on the horizon, casting long shadows across the living room of Sophia's house. Clara, Luke, and Sophia sat in tense silence, each lost in their own thoughts after the decision to search for John. Sophia watched her children, noticing the uneasy expression on Luke's face. He seemed to be struggling internally with something, his eyes avoiding direct contact with hers or Clara's. Luke, Sophia said softly, breaking the silence, is something bothering you? Luke looked up, guilt evident in his eyes. He took a deep breath, as if gathering courage. I need to confess something, he began, his voice trembling. Clara straightened up, instantly alert. What is it? Luke closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them, facing Sophia and Clara directly. When I first came to find you, it wasn't just to meet my family. Sophia felt her heart race. What do you mean, Luke? Luke hesitated, his voice thick with emotion. I initially came for financial reasons. I was struggling, and I thought maybe I could get some kind of inheritance or financial help from you. The silence that followed was deafening. Clara's mouth fell open, disbelief etched on her face. Sophia felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. How could you? Clara exploded, standing up abruptly. Taz, after everything we've been through, after how we welcomed you. Luke lowered his head, shame evident in every line of his body. I know it was terrible, but please, let me explain. Sophia, still stunned, gestured for him to continue. When my mother died, I was alone and lost, Luke continued. The bills piled up, and I was desperate. When I found out about Robert and his family, I saw an opportunity. But then, he paused, tears shining in his eyes. Then I met you. I saw how kind and welcoming you were, even in the midst of your own pain. And I felt horrible. Clara scoffed, crossing her arms. And you should. Clara, Sophia gently admonished, before turning to Luke. Continue, please. Luke nodded, swallowing hard. The more time I spent with you, the more I realized that I had found something much more valuable than money. I found a family, the family I had always wanted. He looked directly at Sophia and Clara, tears now running freely down his face. I fell in love with you two, with the idea of having a mother and a sister, and the guilt for my original motive started eating me up inside. Sophia felt her heart tighten. Part of her wanted to scream, feeling betrayed, but another part understood the desperation that could lead someone to make questionable decisions. Clara, however, was not as understanding. How can we trust you now? How do we know this isn't just another lie? Luke stood up, extending his hands in a pleading gesture. I swear, Clara, I'm being completely honest now. I deeply regret my initial motive. If I could go back... But you can't, Clara interrupted, tears of anger in her eyes. "You built our relationship on a lie." Sophia finally found her voice. "Luke," she said, her voice calm but firm, "why are you telling us this now?" Luke turned to her, his expression a mixture of fear and hope. "Because I can't live with this lie anymore, because you deserve to know the whole truth before we decide to find John, and because," he paused, taking a deep breath, "because I love you both, and I can't keep building our relationship on a foundation of deceit." Silence fell over the room again. Sophia could feel the whirlwind of emotions inside her, disappointment, hurt, but also understanding and, surprisingly, a touch of pride for Luke's courage in confessing. Clara, still visibly shaken, headed for the door. "I need air," she murmured, quickly leaving. Luke made a move to follow her, but Sophia stopped him with a gesture. "Give her time," she said softly. Left alone with Luke, Sophia studied him for a long moment. "You understand how much this hurts us, don't you?" Luke nodded, shame evident on his face. "I know. And I'll completely understand if you don't want anything to do with me anymore. I just needed to be honest, finally." Sophia sighed deeply. "Luke, what you did was wrong. But the fact that you confessed, that you chose honesty, even knowing you could lose us, that says a lot about who you are now." She approached him, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "It will take time to rebuild trust, and Clara may take longer to process this, but Chama, you are still family, and families, well, they forgive, eventually." Luke looked at her, his eyes shining with tears and gratitude. "I don't deserve you," he whispered. "Maybe not," Sophia replied with a small smile. "But you have us anyway. Now, let's give Clara time to calm down, and then we'll talk together. We have a lot to discuss." As the sun finally disappeared on the horizon, Sophia reflected on the twists and turns her life had taken. Secrets revealed, trust shaken, and yet there was still hope. Hope that with honesty and love they could overcome even this. The path ahead would be difficult, but for the first time in a long time, Sophia felt they were truly moving in the right direction. With truth as their compass, perhaps they could finally find their way home. Dawn found Sophia sitting on the porch, a steaming cup of coffee in her hands. The first light of day painted the sky with soft hues of pink and orange, promising a new beginning. The events of the past days weighed on her mind, but there was also a strange sense of peace. The creak of the door announced Clara's arrival, who silently joined her mother. For a few minutes, they sat there watching the sunrise, each lost in their own thoughts. "How are you, dear?" Sophia finally asked, glancing sideways at her daughter. Clara sighed deeply. "Honestly, I don't know. It's like my world has been turned upside down repeatedly over the past weeks." Sophia nodded understandingly. "I know. It's been an emotional roller coaster for all of us." "Mom," Clara hesitated, biting her lip, "do you really think we can trust Luke after what he confessed?" Before Sophia could respond, the sound of footsteps alerted them to Luke's presence. He appeared at the porch door, looking hesitant and tired. "Can I join you?" he asked softly. Sophia looked at Clara, leaving the decision to her. After a moment of tension, Clara nodded reluctantly. Luke sat down, keeping a respectful distance. The silence that followed was heavy, laden with unspoken words and raw emotions. "I spent the whole night thinking," Luke began, his voice low and serious, "about what I did, about who I was and who I want to be. And I've come to a decision." Sophia and Clara turned to him, curious and apprehensive. "I'm going away," Luke announced, surprising both women. "Not because I want to, but because I think it's the right thing to do. You need time and space to process all this without my constant presence reminding you of the mistakes of the past." Clara blinked, clearly taken aback. You're leaving just like that?" Luke nodded sadly. "I've caused enough pain. The last thing I want is to continue being a source of conflict and hurt." Sophia felt her heart tighten. Despite the initial disappointment with Luke's revelation, she couldn't deny the bond that had formed. "Luke, you don't need to go. We can work through this together." Luke smiled sadly. "I appreciate that, Sophia, but I think we all need this time. Besides," he hesitated, looking at Clara, I think it would be good for you two to have some time just for yourselves to reconnect without all these complications. Clara, who had remained silent, finally spoke. What about John? Weren't we going to look for him together? The mention of John brought a new weight to the conversation. Sophia realized that, with everything that had happened, they had almost forgotten this crucial aspect of their family story. Maybe, Sophia suggested carefully, we can postpone the search for John for now. We need to heal first before we can offer him the kind of support and understanding he deserves. Luke and Clara nodded in agreement. Before I go, Luke said, pulling an envelope from his pocket, I wanted to leave this with you. It's some savings I've made over the past few months. It's not much, but I hope it can help in some way, maybe with household expenses or... No, Clara interrupted firmly, surprising everyone, including herself. We don't want your money, Luke. Luke seemed to shrink, the rejection evident on his face. Clara continued, her voice softer now. Not because we don't appreciate the gesture, but because you're family. And family doesn't need to buy their place. Sophia felt tears well up in her eyes at her daughter's words. Luke looked equally emotional. You really consider me family, even after everything? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. Clara sighed, running a hand through her hair in a gesture that reminded Sophia of Robert. Look, I'm still hurt and confused. But you're my brother, and as complicated as it is, I can't deny that. Sophia watched the interaction between her children, feeling a mixture of pride and hope growing in her chest. Maybe, just maybe, they could overcome this together. What if, she suggested gently, instead of leaving completely, you just take a step back? Maybe we can set some boundaries, give us all the space to process but without cutting ties completely. Luke looked hopeful. You would do that? Give me another chance. Clara hesitated for a moment before nodding slowly. Yes, but with conditions. Total honesty from now on. And you need to understand that trust will take time to rebuild. Absolutely, Luke agreed quickly. I'll do whatever it takes. Sophia smiled, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. Then it's decided. We'll move forward, one step at a time. The three sat in silence for a moment, letting the decision settle. The sun was now fully above the horizon, bathing the porch in golden light. And what about John? Clara asked again, breaking the silence. Sophia took a deep breath. I think we should wait a little longer. Let's focus on healing our family first. When we're stronger, more united, then we can think about how to approach John. Luke and Clara agreed, each lost in thoughts about the brother they had yet to meet. You know, Luke said softly, despite everything, I'm grateful. Grateful to have found you, to have a chance to be part of this family. Clara reached out, hesitantly touching Luke's arm. Me too. It's complicated and confusing, but I'm glad to have a brother. Sophia watched her children, feeling a wave of love and gratitude. The road ahead would still be difficult, full of tough conversations and moments of doubt. But for the first time in weeks, she felt true hope for the future. How about, she suggested, standing up, we make breakfast together. We can talk more, make plans. Clara and Luke smiled, nodding in agreement. As the three headed to the kitchen, Sophia couldn't help but think of Robert. Wherever he was, she hoped he could see the family he had left behind, a family that, despite all odds, was finding a way to heal and forgive. The next weeks and months wouldn't be easy. There would be moments of doubt, of resurfacing hurt, of old wounds being reopened. But there would also be the promise of shared laughter, of strengthened bonds, of a family rediscovered. And one day, when they were ready, they would address the matter of John. But for now, it was enough to know that they were together, imperfect but united, facing the future, hand in hand. As the smell of fresh coffee and toast filled the house, Sophia looked at her children, Clara helping Luke find the cups, both laughing at some shared joke, and felt her heart fill with a quiet joy. The past couldn't be changed, but the future was full of possibilities, and for the first time in a long time, Sophia was eager to see what it would bring. Outside, the new day shone, promising not just challenges, but also hope. A hope of healing, of forgiveness, and above all, of the love that only a family, with all its complexities and imperfections, can offer. And so, in that sunny kitchen, with the sound of laughter and the clinking of utensils, a new chapter began for Sophia's family. A chapter of redemption, of second chances, and of a love that, despite everything, had survived the storms of the past and now blossomed under the sun of a new dawn.